Thanks so much for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday. Live from Seoul, I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Let's get a check for today's headlines. For North Korea, hostilities will be met with hostilities. Pyongyang launches a military exercise in response to U.S. hostilities, and South Korean activists' anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaign. Apology or no apology, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe plans to drop key expressions of remorse for Japan's war atrocities from his August statement marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Korea's consumer sentiment rebounds for the first time in 4 months in January, but there are still doubts about whether the economy is on a solid recovery track. North Korea launched a military exercise to counter U.S. hostilities and to protest South Korean activists' latest anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaign. The state-run Korean Central News Agency said Tuesday that its leader Kim Jong-un conducted its frontline troops during the winter drills, saying that a powerful offensive means a rock-firm defense. The agency didn't say, though, where or when the drills were held. In a separate report, it condemned South Korean activists for their latest leaflet launches, while also claiming that the U.S. wanted to topple the regime. By that, the North is talking about U.S. President Barack Obama's remark last week on how the spread of the internet will eventually lead to North Korea's collapse. Slowing momentum for inter-Korean talks, South Korea is not willing to consider the preconditions that North Korea has laid out for the two Koreas to start talking. Our Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
South Korea says it has no plans to consider North Korea's demands for returning to dialogue. Unification Ministry spokesperson Im Byung-chul said Monday the preconditions laid out by Pyongyang are issues that could be discussed at the negotiating table.
For fundamental improvements in inter-Korean relations, South Korean government believes it's not appropriate to accept North Korea's unjustified preconditions before any talks are held.
One of the key preconditions laid out by the North is canceling the upcoming joint military drills between South Korea and the United States. The state-run 노동신문 newspaper on Monday reiterated that inter-Korean relations will meet a dead end if the exercises take place as planned. The paper claimed that the trust between the two Koreas will only be restored after the joint drills are called off. Seoul and Washington say the annual exercises are defensive in nature, but Pyongyang calls it a rehearsal for invasion. Amid the inter-Korean tug-of-war, chief nuclear envoys from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will meet in Tokyo on Wednesday to discuss issues related to North Korea. South Korea will hold a separate vice ministers meeting with the U.S. in Seoul on Thursday. Amid fears of a possible loss of momentum between the two Koreas, the Unification Ministry says its month-old offer for dialogue still stands and that it's waiting for North Korea's response. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
And North Korea has come up with a new regulation to detain South Korean businessmen at the joint Kaesong industrial complex if they are found to be breaking the contract. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Monday that it told North Korea in verbal and written messages that it would not accept the new bylaws. This comes after Pyongyang notified Seoul of the changes back in September. The ministry says the North has no legal basis to detain South Korean businessmen in the complex and that the highest level of punishment would be to have them sent back to South Korea. North Korea has not yet to respond to Seoul's latest comments. There seems to be a consensus among high-profile business leaders that the prospects are bright for people wanting to invest in North Korea if the two Koreas are unified in the future. And our Kwon So-ah got to sit down with Jim Rogers to hear his thoughts on the subject.
Reunification of the two Koreas would mean a lot for the people of South and North Korea, but for foreigners, the thought of a unified Korea means money, at least for investors. Financial experts from around the world see tremendous opportunities for investing in the northern part of the peninsula once unification is achieved. Jim Rogers, the chairman of Rogers Holdings, a legendary investor with a minimum of $300 million in assets, voiced his willingness to invest all of his assets into North Korea if the two Koreas are unified.
It's going to be the most exciting country in the world. You're going to have a country with 75 million people right on the Chinese border, vast natural resources in the north, huge amounts of cheap, disciplined labor in the north. In the south, you have lots of capital, lots of brains, lots of management ability. How big will the economy be? I have no idea, but it's going to be a lot bigger than the combined economy is now.
While China is said to be very interested in investing in the north, Rogers says Japan is not fond of what's expected to come up, as they know they cannot compete with a united Korea. So what are foreign investors most interested in?
They've just built 2 new docks in Rasun. If you look at a map, the Rasun is the northernmost ice-free port in Asia. So you put goods into the port, put them on the train, and Russia has just rebuilt the railroad into Rasun. So that's going to be one good. They want it to be, and it will be, a transportation hub going forward. But they've got huge minerals. In 1972, North Korea was richer than South Korea. It had vast natural resources. They still have them. They've been ruined by the communists. So you go there, open yourself a mine. Silver, coal, iron ore, there are plenty of things you can do there.
The only item the American businessman has purchased so far is North Korean coins due to the many sanctions imposed on the North by the U.S. But Rogers has hope for future investments after meeting with people in the North Korean regime. Experts believe that a deeper understanding of North Korea's current economy and the changes within can vastly improve inter-Korean relations, which could ultimately lead to a unification bonanza on the peninsula. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Apology or no apology? For Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, it might be the latter. He has hinted that he might not include key phrases of remorse or apology over Japan's wartime atrocities in his statement to mark the 70th anniversary of Japan's defeat in World War II. Korea is keeping a sharp eye on what Abe will end up saying in August. Our Park Ji-won has the story.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has suggested he may not include key expressions used by previous administrations to show remorse over Japan's wartime wrongdoings. Abe is set to release a statement in August, marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. In a televised interview, he said, "It's not about whether we use expressions that have been repeated in the past." Although he plans on inheriting the spirit of previously issued statements, he added that he wants to put out a statement that represents his administration's stance on the 70th anniversary. The Korean government expressed concerns on Monday. Seoul's foreign ministry said if Abe is sincere about upholding the spirit of previous apologies, his new statement should include expressions that could heal and improve relations with neighboring countries. Abe's stance has also garnered criticism in Tokyo. The leader of Japan's main opposition Democratic Party, Katsuya Okada, among others, called his remarks intolerable, saying it will deny the peaceful path that Japan has taken over the past 7 decades. In a statement in 1995, then Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama expressed deep apology over his country's colonial aggression, which caused tremendous suffering, to mark the 50th anniversary of Japan's defeat. And in 2005, then Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi used similar key expressions in his statement on the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, the Japanese government is coordinating efforts with other countries to save Kenji Goto, a Japanese held captive by the Islamic State militants. Tokyo says although it hasn't made direct contact with the militants yet, it's working with Jordan after the group changed its ransom demand to a prisoner swap. In the latest video posted by the IS, a man's voice, assumed to be Goto's, reads a statement saying that he would be freed if an Iraqi woman imprisoned in Jordan is released. Japan's deputy foreign minister, who was sent to Jordan to take care of this matter, promised to not give up until they save Mr. Goto. Over in Athens, with the new anti-austerity prime minister set to lead Greece, the country faces the multi-billion euro question of how it's going to renegotiate the country's massive debt. But as the European Union comes down on Greece, there's the question of whether the differences will eventually push the country out of the Eurozone. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
No debt forgiveness. Europe seems willing to give Greece more time to pay off its debt, but will not give in to the new government's demand for debt forgiveness, saying a further debt reduction for Athens would go against Eurozone rules. Greece's new prime minister, Alexis Tsipras, had called for forgiveness of nearly a third of its more than $300 billion debt. The new anti-austerity posture shown by Greece pits it directly against Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel, an advocate of austerity plans. A spokesman for the German Chancellor urged Greece to fulfill the debt commitments it has made to its European creditors. Echoing the sentiment, the Eurogroup chair said Eurozone financial leaders are ready to work things out with Greece, but that there is little support for a write-off in Europe, and Eurogroup members should abide by the rules and commitments.
So there is still a major work to be done in which we will support the Greek government on the basis of true cooperation and commitment. And that's the basis on which we will work.
There are now rising concerns that Greece may want out of the 19-member group in the coming months. French President François Hollande said Greece must stay in the Eurozone and respect its financial obligations by keeping its debt repayment promises. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Back here in Korea, President Park Geun-hye continued her creative economy drive with a visit to Korea's southwestern city of Gwangju on Tuesday to mark the opening of an innovation center there. Speaking in Gwangju, President Park said the new center will become a base for the region's auto-related industries to further innovate and expand globally. She also hoped for the city to become a hub for hydrogen vehicles. The Gwangju Center is one of 17 centers the government has pledged to establish to collaborate with conglomerates and helping startups realize their business ideas and local small and mid-sized firms build competitiveness in the global market. The government is going to pour millions of dollars into boosting creative industries in Korea's provincial areas this year. In its first Regional Economic Committee meeting of 2015, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it will inject some $549 million into facilitating local industries and innovative sectors. This follows a midterm development plan established in September last year that designated 14 provinces and cities as hubs of different industry sectors in an effort to enhance synergy. A handful of creative economy centers will be also launched nationwide in the first half of this year. Consumer sentiment in Korea this month rebounded for the first time in 4 months. It might sound like positive news, but actually, the low index indicates that the improvement is not strong enough to suggest a sluggish domestic economy is quite out of the woods yet. Our Hwang Jae explains.
Consumer sentiment in Korea improved for the first time in 4 months in January. The Bank of Korea says its consumer sentiment index came in at 102 this month, up a single point from a month earlier. The figure, however, is lower than the level posted last May when consumer confidence was hit hard by the Seoul ferry disaster. The central bank also attributed the uptick to a general trend in which a rebound takes place after 3 straight months of decline, rather than a sign that the economy is on a solid recovery track. It added that the index has never fallen for 3 or 4 months in a row except for cases when there was a major shock in the domestic economy. Still, a reading above 100 means optimists outnumber pessimists. While the monthly index that reflects the overall economic outlook of consumers fails to strengthen signs of recovery, this year's forecast among local exporters does not look so bright either. A survey conducted by the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency on around 900 exporters shows that more than a third of them are skeptical about economic conditions this year. Less than a quarter said they felt positive, while the rest said the conditions should be manageable. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
And despite public criticisms over the government's structural reforms, the government must carry out those reforms to create a better country for future generations. This comment comes from Korean Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, who met with some 20 university students on Monday. There, the minister promised to reduce the nation's youth unemployment rate. He also said the government is pushing ahead with reforms so that it could provide young people with more high-quality jobs. Addressing concerns of female students about continuing on with their career after getting married and having a child, the minister said the government will ease regulations and provide more tax benefits to make a better environment for working moms. Global oil prices have gone down dramatically over the last few months, but drivers in Korea aren't enjoying most of the benefits. Our Kim Min-ji reports why Korean prices at the pump are still lofty.
Global crude prices have been on a downward spiral in recent months. However, gasoline prices in Korea haven't been falling as quickly as local drivers would have liked. Dubai crude, which accounts for nearly 90% of Korea's oil imports, traded at $93 a barrel during the first week of October last year, but has since plunged over 50% to $45. However, at the pump, the average price of a liter of gasoline fell from about $1.70 to about $1.30 over the same period. This is only a fall of 18%. Why the big difference? Industry officials point to a string of taxes levied on oil consumption. Ex-factory prices of gasoline have indeed fallen in line with global crude prices, but consumers in Korea face transportation, road, and education taxes totaling some 70 cents per liter, plus a 10% oil consumption tax. With the taxes largely fixed, their proportion in consumer gas prices has surged. The tax currently makes up over 60% of gasoline prices, up from 54% 3 months ago. But consumers aren't the only ones dissatisfied. Gas stations are also battling it out for customers and are doing all they can to slash prices, even if it is just by a solitary cent. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, Disney's latest film, Big Hero, is winning rave reviews around the world for its quirky yet heartwarming story and amazing animation. But the movie, which was released in Korea just last week, is also garnering attention here because of its interesting connection to Korea. With more, here's our Son Jung-in.
Strong, agile, smart, and cute. This is Gogo, a female character in Disney's latest film, Big Hero. She's the first animated character inspired by a Korean actress to hit the mainstream. Her creator is Kim Sang-jin, the first Korean to become a top designer at Walt Disney Studios, who also designed Elsa from Disney's 2013 award-winning film, Frozen.
Gogo is, I think she's the only one character who can take care of herself without anybody's help.
When creating Gogo, Kim and his team originally thought of South Korean actress Bae Do-na and her courageous character in the movie The Host, and then incorporated independent and athletic traits from Korean short track skaters.
It was overall a very hard work. Teamwork also played a big part in the project.
Baymax, the main character's lovable companion, has a balloon-like face with eyes connected by a thin line that evokes the image of a moktak, a wooden percussion instrument often used by Buddhist monks. Korean-American actress Jamie Chung and actor Daniel Henney also participated in the film as voice actors.
It's a movie with a huge Disney heart, a lot of action, and some amazing messages that I think apply very well to what's going on in our society today.
The animated adventure of a young robotic genius and his superhero team has warmed the hearts of moviegoers around the world and also aims to top the box office in Korea. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Artists can make their mark in many different ways, and for musicians, their songs can have an impact for years to come. And today, our Im Yoon-hee joins us with the story of one musician who's being honored through a musical dedicated to his work. Welcome.
Hello. So the late indie musician Lee Ji-yoon, he was a beloved musician here in Korea. He created the one-man band called Moonlight Nymph, the Grand Slam Homer. Now a musical was created in honor of this musician, featuring some of his most popular works. Take a look at this next report.
On the rooftop of an apartment building, a few familiar songs float through the air. The musical Moonlight Nymph is like a jukebox, taking audiences back through the history of the late indie musician Lee Ji-yoon. Hobble, Acorns, and My Song are just a few of these songs that make up the musical score for this energetic performance. In all, 10 songs from Lee's albums are included, but it's the memory of the dedicated musician and his one-man band, Moonlight Nymph, the Grand Slam Homer, that really strikes a chord on stage and keeps Lee's love for indie music alive.
You know, I remember his death being quite sudden and pretty controversial.
Right, so about 4 years ago, he did pass due to a sudden heart attack, but his death really sparked quite a shock in the indie music industry and caused a debate over his death and over the living conditions of indie musicians here in Korea. So at that time, it was said that he had many successful albums, but he still lived in poverty. And some allegations even said that he was paid in acorns, which is a cyber form of money on Korea's social online network called World. And so it was very shocking to hear some of that about a musician that a lot of people did know about.
Okay. Well, how does Korean wave or the love for K-pop from around the world, how does that affect indie music industry?
So a couple pros and cons with that. So with the boom of K-pop around the world, so the indie music industry kind of took a hit and some attention was diverted away from the indie music industry as a result. But while K-pop did do well abroad, now the attention is going back to Korean indie music as well. And so there are a lot of rock festivals around the world that are now starting to include Korean indie music groups. And there are festivals here in Korea, but in North America and Japan, those are a couple of countries, a couple areas that do feature a lot of Korean indie music groups in their festivals.
Okay, well, how is the indie music industry doing here in Korea then?
Right, so we've seen a lot of growth recently with the indie music industry. If you've ever gone to the Hongdae area, you've noticed that the indie culture is thriving there as well. There are also a lot of festivals here in the country, in Korea, a lot of rock festivals that feature some of the indie groups. The Busan Rock Festival, the Incheon Pentaport Rock Festival, the Ansan Valley Rock Festival, just to name a few. The list really does go on. But you can see now, especially in this digital age, a lot of opportunities for these indie musicians to get their music out there and to express their creativity.
Okay, well, let's hope for the best for them in the future.
Always a pleasure.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. A sudden cold front has brought chillier weather upon us, and the morning lows drop below freezing today, and we are expecting highs just above zero here in Seoul. And while chill weather factor is much higher, so make sure to layer up a couple of more layers between a couple of more days. Now we have mostly clear skies today with just light layers of clouds drifting by, which will bring out the sun more even through our day. Now, meanwhile, it's a totally different story for the people on the East Coast and the coastal areas of Gangwon-do and have a heavy snowfall alert in effect. And they're expecting up to 30 centimeters of snow, while Gyeongsang-buk-do is expecting a bit less, but still a heavy snowfall of between 1 to 20 centimeters. Now, while just expecting 1 to 5 in the rest of the country. And to other regions for our readings, for today, Seoul will peak up to 1 this afternoon, while the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will top out higher at 5 and 9 degrees. And to other regions such as Jeju Island gets up to 7, Dokdo hits down to 1, while Mankungang drops low to -7 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right, stay warm and, enjoy those clear skies, though. All right, that brings us to the end, but I'll be back with a lot more on our next newscast at 4 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned.